the City of Angels and make some noise for saving lives. Good morning to our leaders, the students who are here today. They are the ones who are leading the way, and we should follow. And thank you to the parents and the grandparents and the teachers and the friends and the aunts and the uncles who are here today. It is time to protect kids and not protect guns. To the students, I feel that today will be written in the history books that your children will read. They will see that you are the generation that said, enough is enough and never again. Never again. That you said, we won't sit down, we will rise up.
I'm here because I've experienced so much gun violence just growing up in school and seeing it. I used to live in Michigan, seeing it there, seeing it when I moved here, especially at Santa Monica College. There was a shooting in 2013. So I've seen so many examples of why this is so important.
I'm here today because a lot of my family and my friends have been affected by the Las Vegas shooting.
I mean, it's like shooting fish in a barrel from where he was. I hate to say that, use that sort of term, but
Americans want gun safety. But why don't things change?
I think when it comes to people who are in power, like our politicians right now, a lot of them are swayed, especially some very conservative Republicans, because of the NRA's influence on them.
But we need to stop the NRA's political influence.
We really need to not only take away the power of the NRA and their ability to buy our politicians, but we really need different politicians who don't hold these values and aren't beholden to them.
A lot of people are getting fed up, and I think a time of change is coming very soon.
Mass shootings have become an epidemic in America. And while our elected leaders confront other threats to public safety, they seem incapacitated when it comes to dealing with this.
Report what appears to be another school shooting.
Well, I'd like to see a ban on assault weapons.
We'd like to see the AR-15s removed from the stores, for starters.
I would like to have mandatory background checks.
I would like to see a ban on high-capacity magazines.
And bump stocks.
I'd like to make it illegal for people who are domestic abusers to have a gun.
We talk about fish in a barrel as an idea of a helpless target. Children in a classroom are like fish in a barrel.
And I'm scared because my younger brother and sister are in middle school and elementary school, respectively. And now that I'm going off to college, I can't be here to protect them.
But it's not just students in a classroom that are like fish in a barrel. Logic is under assault like fish in a barrel. Our campaign finance laws are under attack like fish in a barrel. Our gun laws are like fish in a barrel.
I'm from Wisconsin, and I'm from a hunting culture. Many of the boys and men I grew up with hunted. I'm not anti-gun. I'm pro-common sense gun laws, and I think that having potentially a gun to defend yourself is not necessarily a crazy idea, and definitely, you know, we need to keep that on the table. But the idea that, you know, we don't have any common sense gun laws at all is crazy. We need to start with common sense gun laws.
We're not trying to remove guns from America or outlaw firearms, but we don't have to live this way, kissing our kids goodbye every day, knowing it could be the last time we see them. And yet, it's not like we haven't tried to find a middle ground before.
Hello and welcome to the Million Mom March. Tomorrow you're going to hear the NRA saying that this many people were not here, but the fact is there are 750,000 people here. 30,000 people are shot dead every year in this country. Over 4,000 of them are children. We have had enough. Enough of the NRA and their tactics. Enough of the stranglehold the NRA has in Congress and in the Senate. The NRA is buying votes with blood money. The gun lobby has a multi-billion-dollar vested interest in preventing sensible gun legislation. They have a financial motive. It is about money, not amendments. Our motive, the lives of citizens of this country.
You see all these people? They're serious about getting some sensible gun control.
And yet, the NRA shoots down any effort at regulation. How?
One of the reasons why gun policy in the United States has become more and more permissive is the role that the NRA has played over time. They are actually a very old organization, but in the past few decades, they have been very powerful at using money in politics to get their way. They also have a very dedicated membership, so they also have voters, and voters who care about gun issues very deeply. They can also mobilize money, so they can use their funds and they can run political ads against that candidate.
DC liberals oppose your gun rights.
Against our right to self-defense.
Imagine your child screaming in the middle of the night when a convicted felon breaks into your home.
And the only person who can stop it is you.
How did Andrew Gillum get nominated for governor? He was pushed in by the most radical liberal justices oppose your rights. And Joe Donnelly is on.
Driscoll sided all 4 times with the liberal left. She's radical. Too radical for Georgia.
The NRA Institute for Legislative Action is responsible for the country.
The threat of spending in elections is a favorite weapon in the NRA's arsenal. In the race against Montana Senator Jon Tester, his opponent Matt Rosendale was recorded at a bar saying that the NRA was going to spend heavily in the race against Tester.
Outside groups started spending on your behalf?
Yes. I fully expect that the U.S. Chamber is going to come in, and I fully expect the NRA is going to come in. I think both of them will be coming in probably right here in August sometime.
This is a big race for the NRA.
Yeah. The Supreme Court confirmations are big. That's what sent the NRA over the line. Chris Cox told me, he's like, well, we're going to be in this.
This constitutes illegal coordination.
When a committee, group, or individual pays for a communication that is coordinated with a campaign or a candidate, the communication is either an in-kind contribution or, in some limited cases, a coordinated party expenditure by a party committee.
But as we'll see, the NRA is no stranger to breaking election laws. Another way the NRA circumvents campaign ad law is through NRA TV.
I will not tolerate her dancing on the graves of the American values.
Kamala Harris is a political sycophant of the highest order. She's like a desperate dude at a bar right after last call, willing to say anything to go home with whoever's still there.
Without the Electoral College, the system would be forever tipped in favor of the anti-gun big city liberals.
In 2002, Congress passed the Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act, banning political broadcast ads in the weeks before an election. The NRA and its ad agency, Ackerman McQueen, figured they could work around political advertising rules by going into the news business. And so, in 2004, the precursor to NRA TV was born. Having a dedicated Rage channel also helps the NRA engage its membership.
Make them protest. Make them scream racism and sexism and xenophobia and homophobia, to smash windows, burn cars, shut down interstates and airports, bully and terrorize the law-abiding. The only way we save our country and our freedom is to fight this violence of lies with the clenched fist of truth. To CNN, The Washington Post, and The New York Times, your time is running out. The clock starts now.
The NRA, a lobby that finances campaigns, that forces legislation, put out a video basically saying your time is running out. A few days before this video, she had another video called A Call to Arms. I ask you a question. If this was put out by a terrorist organization, we would be raising the terror threat level in this country. Why are we letting this lobby have anything to do in D.C.? I don't understand it.
With its push for guns and fire-breathing videos, the NRA has been compared to a terrorist group. Is that an accurate comparison?
Quite frankly, in some cases, is a terrorist organization. The NRA, as it exists today, is a far cry from the NRA that in 1999 said teachers shouldn't carry weapons in schools. In the 90s also said that we should have universal background checks. They have, in essence, become a terrorist organization.
But to people who think of themselves as a good guy with a gun and terrorists as the bad guys, the comparison will always be a discussion ender.
As you might expect, some agreed with the sign, others didn't like it.
It really has no basis in reality or fact.
I'm offended by it, and I just think it's just ignorant.
Here's a terrorism expert describing recruitment tactics in YouTube videos used by terrorist groups like ISIS.
Their recruitment via very slick, multilingual, almost Hollywood-style videos that promote excitement, weaponry, empowerment, all of these things, revenge, and maybe the most important, community. We've built a new society. Come to us. It's like every other radical extremist group, whether it's a cult or otherwise, they narrow the trough. And that's all you hear day in and day out. So eventually, that is your reality.
While they may have some similar tactics and tone, there's a major difference between terrorist groups and the NRA. Terrorist groups are driven by ideology. The NRA is driven by money.
The National Rifle Association is, above all else, a trade group representing gun manufacturers. Donors include Midway USA, Springfield Armory, Beretta USA, Ruger, Smith & Wesson, and others in the industry.
San Francisco's Board of Supervisors today taking the drastic step of officially declaring the nation's premier.
Another problem with calling the NRA a terrorist organization is that it allows the NRA to hide behind its members.
I shake my head and I go, what the heck is going wrong in our country? Let's give them a real clear view of who we all are. How many police officers do we have here today? Please stand up. Anyone who works in healthcare, in any ways, anyone who works in education.
Now that they mention it, how many members does the NRA really have? While the NRA claims to have 5 million members, public records suggest the membership might be closer to 3.7 million. And while there are more and more guns owned in the US, more and more of them are owned by the same people. Of course, most gun owners are not criminals, and most guns are not used in crimes, but that still puts 300 million guns out on the streets. And although gun control advocates said they were more invested in gun issues, NRA members were found to be 4 times more likely to donate money or contact politicians. And yet, even NRA members support basic safety measures such as comprehensive background checks.
I am for background checks, right? So background check everybody who's at a gun store.
I'm not opposed to a background check. I am opposed to gun registration because it just creates a way for everybody to be identified, and I don't think that's the right thing in a country that cherishes its freedom.
While many NRA members share concerns about gun owners being put on a list.
Why do you think there's been so much opposition to background checks, if you from a law enforcement perspective?
Just people are always afraid that, of big government. You look at other countries such as England and Australia, then came confiscation.
But for folks who don't like being listed and profiled, the NRA has spent years building a list of tens of millions of people without their permission by acquiring gun permits, rosters of gun safety classes, buying lists of attendees of gun shows and subscribers to gun magazines, offering to buy lists of concealed carry permit holders from state police, or looking up a permit holder's state records.
And a new proposal for expanding background checks.
The bipartisan deal was announced by Democratic...
When a bill to expand existing background checks was introduced in the Senate, Republicans balked at it because they claimed it might create a national gun registry.
That could lead to a national registry system for guns.
Even though the bill literally made it a felony to create a gun registry.
I will not be voting for this. I think it potentially could lead to a gun registry, which I'm not for.
And I think for good reason come out against the Toomey Manchin compromise as something that might very well lead to a national registry.
Claims that this legislation would create a gun registry is nothing more than shameful scare tactics.
The NRA spread that misinformation using its own database of gun owners that did not consent to be on their list.
A few minutes ago, a minority in the United States Senate blocked common sense gun reforms, even while these families looked on from the Senate gallery. By now, it's well known that 90% of the American people support universal background checks that make it harder for a dangerous person to buy a gun. The gun lobby and its allies willfully lied about the bill. They claimed that it would create some sort of big brother gun registry. This legislation, in fact, outlawed any registry. Plain and simple, right there in the text. And unfortunately, this pattern of spreading untruths about this legislation served a purpose, because those lies upset an intense minority of gun owners, and that in turn intimidated a lot of senators.
You can tell by the defeat of the Manchin-Toomey-Schumer amendment that our members came out and they called their elected officials. Creating more laws and expanding broken systems is not going to do anything to curb violence.
In the meantime, mass shootings keep happening, and legislators refuse to do anything to stop them, even after a mass shooting of legislators.
Scalise's security detail and the Capitol Hill Police immediately began.
It would certainly appear that this was a targeted assassination attempt on members of Congress who were practicing for a charity baseball game.
We medics, we got a suspect right by the baseball field from the YTA. There's also a stop.
What were guns supposed to be for?
When I was a kid growing up, it wasn't an uncommon thing for us to take our guns to school so we could go hunting after school, and nobody thought any differently because at that time our mentality was different. It's changed a lot in this country since then.
Oh, right. Hunting.
There is a bear in the woods. For some people, the bear is easy to see. Others don't see it at all.
This is not a PSA about hunting.
Others say it's vicious and dangerous. Since no one can really be sure who's right, isn't it smart to be as strong as the bear?
This is an ad for Ronald Reagan alluding to Soviet Russia. Republicans sure used to be anti-Russia.
May Day brings a wave of anti-communist sentiment as 100,000 march down New York's Fifth Avenue in a loyalty parade. Everyone from vets to youngsters reveals his inborn dislike of communism.
In the 1950s, fear of communist Russia swept America during the Cold War. Republicans like Senator Joseph McCarthy held hearings searching for communist sympathizers, ending countless careers, including his own.
You have this United States, from the Atlantic to the Pacific, covered with a network of professors and teachers who are getting their orders from Moscow, from an organization that wants to destroy this nation, that wants to corrupt the minds of youth.
Have you no sense of decency, sir, at long last?
McCarthy never found any Russian spies. Julius and Ethel Rosenberg were executed for sharing nuclear secrets with the Soviet Union, despite evidence of Ethel's innocence. We now know that their judge had illegal conferences with one of the prosecutors, a future chief counsel of Senator McCarthy. That attorney, Roy Cohn, whose apprentice was none other than Donald Trump. Roy Cohn also advised the Reagan campaign during the Bear in the Woods. So, to reiterate, Republicans have been vehemently anti-Russia for generations. And you might be thinking, The Soviet Union was completely different than what Russia is today, right? Ben Nimmo, an analyst at the Atlantic Council's DFR Labs, which tracks Russian propaganda, said Russian tactics mirrored those used by the Soviet Union against its own people. The Soviets used massacres, the Gulag prison system, and the KGB intelligence service to intimidate and eliminate potential opponents inside the Soviet Union and outside its borders. That is the system Putin came out of. In 2016, Russia interfered in U.S. elections, something they have done to dozens of countries. They did this through hacked DNC emails released through WikiLeaks, widespread disinformation campaigns on social media. They hacked voter databases in all 50 states. They penetrated the election systems in at least 39 states.
This is incredibly significant. I mean, 39 states were breached with security by the Russians.
Russia targeted voting systems in all 50 states.
On election night 2016, exit polls showed Clinton handily winning Florida, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Wisconsin, states which ended up being called for Trump. Computer scientists reported evidence of rigged vote results in 3 states. In one Senate report, a Russian intelligence agent described uncorking champagne on election night 2016, saying,
"Мы сделали Америку великой."
Top secret NSA report that concluded Russian military intelligence executed a cyber attack on at least one software company that supplied voting software and targeted local election officials. What do you make of this?
We need to declassify more of that information so that Americans can fully appreciate how broad and far-reaching this Russian attempt to interfere in our most basic democratic process.
And we're learning disturbing new detail about just how pervasive the Russian attack on the 2016 election actually was.
But it's not just our election systems.
Russian hackers were able to gain access to the control rooms of U.S. electric utilities last year.
Russia hacked into the U.S. electrical grid. Russia has agents in the U.S. Treasury Department. Russia even breached the FBI from U.S. soil.
Stunning breach of U.S. intelligence by Russian spies long before the 2016 election.
And Russia is already hacking our next elections. So between the Cold War and now, it's safe to say, no, Russia is not an ally of the United States, and is in fact a hostile nation.
What Russia is doing and what Mueller really wanted us to take away from his investigation is that they will not stop. The U.S. is the #1 enemy.
Russia's election meddling comes on top of existing voter suppression perpetuated by Republicans.
At the end of the day, a lot of us are campaign officials or campaign professionals, and we want to do everything we can to help our side. And sometimes we think that's voter ID, sometimes we think that's longer lines, whatever it may be.
Illegal voter purges, gerrymandering, voter ID laws, voter misinformation, voter intimidation, unreliable voting systems, the Electoral College.
Right, traditionally, it's always been Republicans suppressing votes in places. And that's what you're going to see in 2020. That's what's going to be markedly different. It's going to be a much bigger program, much more aggressive program, a much better funded program. And we're going to need all the help we can get, especially in Wisconsin, because again, this is the state where the tipping point is.
And all this in a new era of campaign finance laws, which lets candidates discreetly work with organizations that take undisclosed sums after Supreme Court decisions like Citizens United versus FEC, McCutcheon versus FEC. And now, we don't even have a functioning FEC.
Right now, the agency in charge of enforcing campaign finance laws, the Federal Election Commission, is largely unable to function. The departure.
And so in this new age of campaign finance lawlessness, a candidate announced he would self-finance a run for president. But he soon took in more money than any Republican before him.
We became the first major organization to offer him our full-throated endorsement because we saw through the media deception and recognized him for who he was.
The NRA spent $30 million to elect Trump. As reported in the Trace and Mother Jones, both the Trump campaign and the NRA bought campaign ads in 2016 at the same time on the same channels for the same time slots by the same firm and the same employees.
What strikes me about all of these interrelationships here is that this is the most obvious form of coordination that I've ever seen. I mean, it is, most people are a lot more subtle about their coordination than this.
So you're saying this is illegal?
Yes.
The Trump campaign gave $74 million to American Media and Advocacy Group to buy ads, a company without a website. The NRA used Red Eagle Media Group to buy their ads. The problem? Both are side entities of the same company, National Media Research Planning and Placement. All three entities have the same address in Alexandria, Virginia. Media contracts and disclosure forms revealed that it was even the same individuals buying airtime for both the NRA and the Trump campaign.
He'll stand up for us. I stand up to President Obama. He'll stand up against their extreme gun control agenda.
Similar illegal coordination occurred by the NRA in 2014 to help Republicans win back control of the U.S. Senate in 3 key races.
The Empire State Building is red because the Republicans will be the majority in the United States Senate.
Republican Senate candidates were using an established consulting firm, OnMessage Inc., paying them millions more than other vendors. When OnMessage reached the limits of their candidates' resources, another entity conveniently stepped in to buy ads for the NRA in the exact same Senate races at the exact same time. Starboard Strategic, which never existed before this race, was suddenly making millions of dollars from the NRA, their only client. The thing is, OnMessage Inc. and Starboard Strategic are registered at the same address, which just happens to be the same address as American Media and Advocacy Group, Red Eagle Media Group, and National Media Research Planning and Placement. The corporate officers of OnMessage Inc. are Kurt Anderson, Wes Anderson, Brad Todd, Orrin Guy Harrison, Graham Schaefer, and Timmy Tepel. The corporate officers of Starboard Strategic are Kurt Anderson, Wes Anderson, Brad Todd, Orrin Guy Harrison, Graham Schaefer, and, of course, Timmy Tepel. All these groups spending on the same races at the same times by the same guys actually sounds like just one group violating FEC laws. There have been multiple FEC complaints filed about brazen coordination with the NRA and Republican candidates for the Senate. Meanwhile, members of Congress have asked repeatedly what the NRA was doing hiding behind different companies. They've been stonewalled. I asked Ann Ravel, the former chair of the FEC, why does the FEC not take action?
There has been such division amongst the commissioners that, because we know there are 6 commissioners, no more than 3 can be of one political party. And what occurred at the FEC was one of the potential commissioners went to Mitch McConnell, and that was Don McGahn, and said, if 3 commissioners all vote in unison on every single matter, then they can prevent any issues from being either investigated or enforced. Today, there is not even quorums, of course, and so the commission cannot meet.
So right now, the FEC cannot meet. They can't vote on matters. If someone files a complaint that says that this campaign violated election law, the FEC cannot legally meet to vote on whether or not to punish that campaign.
When she was a commissioner at the FEC, Ann Ravel became concerned about unregulated online political videos influencing elections. Spending on political ads are reported for TV and radio. Why not the internet? She thought the FEC was turning a blind eye to the internet's growing force in the political arena. Her comments brought a torrent of online abuse and death threats. An FEC event she had planned on internet advertisements was canceled for safety concerns. This was 2014. The FEC took no action. In 2015, the FEC was debating how to make sure foreign money wasn't going into online political ads. Ann Ravel asked, I mean, think of it. Do we want Vladimir Putin or drug cartels to be influencing American elections? The FEC took no action. By 2016, the NRA wasn't just committing illegal campaign coordination. There may have been actual Russian money going into the NRA's election efforts.
So you're saying that Russian money went into the NRA, which spent heavily on and coordinated with the Trump campaign in 2016?
Yes, that is exactly right. Russian money went in.
McClatchy's reported in January of 2018 that the FBI has opened an investigation into where the NRA got the money that they spent in the 2016 presidential election. Now, the NRA spending in 2016 was remarkable for a number of reasons. One of the reasons is it was basically twice as big as it had been in previous cycles. And it was basically $20 million more than they had been spending. And so one of the big questions that we don't know the answer to is, where did that extra $20 million come from? It's very possible that they motivated their own base of NRA members, and all of that money came from those NRA members. That's one story. The story that McClatchy's has is that the FBI is looking at Russia as a potential source of NRA funds. And in particular, there is a Russian banker named Alexander Torshin who may be the source of some of those funds. Reporting from other sources that Alexander Torshin has attended various NRA meetings over the past few years, and that he has cultivated a relationship with the NRA.
The FBI is investigating whether the NRA took money from these Russian interest groups, which, it's almost as if the NRA is a shameless, greed-driven financial enterprise that has almost nothing to do with defending the Constitution at all.
This is what we know. Alexander Torshin was born in 1953 and grew up in a province of the Soviet Union, which is no longer part of Russia. He earned a law degree through correspondence school in 1978. He moved to Moscow and worked for the government, ascending through the Bank of Russia in the 1990s, then becoming a politician in 2001, representing the Mari El Republic in the Russian Federation. Torshin rose through the ranks of the Federation Council over the next 10 years and became a leading party official for United Russia, Vladimir Putin's political party. Banker, politician, party leader, also an alleged mob boss. In Spain, intelligence officials had been following the Russian mafia for years. The FBI tipped them off to a massive money laundering ring by a powerful Russian mafia organization from St. Petersburg known as the Tambov Gang. By 2012, Spanish investigators identified an individual who had given step-by-step direction on using banks and real estate to conceal criminal profits. Russian mobsters referred to him as the boss and the Godfather in wiretap recordings. Alexander Torshin. Spanish police were set up to arrest Torshin at a mobster's birthday party in 2013, but somehow Torshin was tipped off and eluded capture. Meanwhile, Torshin traveled regularly to the United States from Russia. Enter G. Klein Preston IV, a lawyer from Tennessee who is pro-Confederacy, who has authored books about Russian regulations and has represented clients in Russia and Ukraine. Preston studied in Russia and speaks Russian. His office is adorned in Russian paraphernalia. Preston knew Torshin from his visits to Russia, and in 2011 introduced Torshin to the president of the NRA at the time, David Keene. Torshin was a gun enthusiast himself. He had written a colorful pamphlet arguing for gun rights, and he was a personal friend of Mikhail Kalashnikov, the father of the AK-47. Torshin, a Russian senator, also had a keen interest in U.S. politics. Preston used the NRA to secure Torshin as an observer to the 2012 elections. This is a phone message left at the NRA headquarters for the NRA president about helping Torshin. This is an email within the Tennessee Secretary of State office securing Torshin as an election observer. This is Klein's signature at the polling station on Election Day, plus Russian senator. And on Election Day, there was Torshin, tweeting a photo of himself smirking in line with voters, writing, "I stand in line at the polling station like an ordinary American." Torshin wrote that the NRA made his election observation possible. He probably thanked them personally because he went straight to NRA headquarters in Virginia after the 2012 election. Torshin even attended the 2012 NRA convention in St. Louis as a VIP guest of NRA President David Keene. In the fall of 2011, Torshin attended a demonstration in Moscow protesting Russia's ban on guns, where attendees showed off items that they were forced to defend themselves with without guns, such as shovels and appliances. Torshin was entertained by the gathering and took note of its organizer, a young college graduate who had just moved to Moscow. Her name, Maria Butina. Maria Butina was born in 1988 in Barnaul, a remote city in Siberia. Butina graduated from her local state university in 2010 with degrees in political science and education. She ran for local office and lost. Butina's father made furniture, so Butina opened a small chain of furniture stores, House and Home. A year later, she moved to Moscow to open an advertising firm, but realized there would be stiff competition, so she reorganized her local shooting club into an advocacy group to push for looser gun laws in Russia. She had only been in Moscow a few months in 2011 when she met Torshin at this protest. Butina soon began working as an unpaid special assistant to Senator Torshin at the Russian Federation Council and later at the Bank of Russia. By 2012, Torshin and Butina had formed their own organization, Right to Bear Arms, using American phrasing for a Russian group. They soon had impressively produced events with signage, banners, and organized marches that other local activists marveled at. In their first year, Right to Bear Arms was putting on conferences. In 2013, Torshin attended the annual NRA convention and invited NRA President David Keene to Moscow for a Right to Bear Arms event, which included a fashion show of concealed carry styles.
NRA, David Keene, Соединенные Штаты Америки.
Maria, thank you very much.
Butina was at the center of it all. Now, she was with the big guns. Freeze frame. Record scratch. This might be a good place in our timeline to point out something a number of people have emphasized about the gun rights movement in Russia. There is none. It just doesn't exist, according to an expert on Russian policy, Anders Aslund, a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council. It's a ridiculous front organization with the purpose of infiltrating American groups and forging cooperation with the NRA.
And the group that he made up, Right to Bear Arms, there's no right to bear arms in Russia.
Glenn Simpson, the founder of Fusion GPS, the firm at the heart of the Steele dossier, testified to a House committee that he had investigated Torshin extensively, putting it like this.
The most absurd about this is that, Vladimir Putin is not in favor of universal gun ownership for Russians. So it's all a big charade, basically. It appears the Russians, infiltrated the NRA.
It's during this trip by NRA President David Keene to Moscow in October of 2013 that his aide, Paul Erickson, meets Maria Butina. Erickson is a longtime Republican operative with numerous party ties, a prime opportunity for an ambitious networker looking to make contacts in the U.S. And in 2014, Butina makes her move, a glow-up, and her first visit to the United States. This is a photo shoot Butina did for the Russian GQ magazine. While Butina does actually shoot and knows how to properly hold handguns, this seems more cosplay than firearm advocacy. Butina and Torshin attended NRA events in April and May of 2014 in Nashville and Indianapolis, presenting the president of the NRA with an award on behalf of Right to Bear Arms for no apparent reason. Each morning of their trips, Torshin would present Butina with white lilies or a stuffed animal. A father to two daughters, Torshin seemed to take a paternal interest in Butina, talking her up proudly on social media, even naming her godmother to one of his grandchildren. In Russia, Right to Bear Arms was picking up steam, attracting much bigger crowds than the yard tool protest just a couple years before. Butina was becoming a national figure. Butina brought an American speaker to Moscow with ties to the NRA, Paul Erickson. Somewhere around this time, Butina becomes romantically involved with Erickson. While he is nearly 2 decades older than she is, or twice her age, they share a passion for Republican politics. But in retrospect, this was all preface to much bigger plans for the next couple of years. Here, Butina speaks in favor of Russia invading Crimea, a literal coup by Putin.
Люди, крымчане, русские люди всего лишь просили признания их собственного права на идентичность, признание их истории, признание их языка, признание вопросов их управления, локальных, местных, региональных, и никто за многие годы...
This seems far afield from gun rights.
This organization was crafted for 3 years to launch operations in 2015. That means there was a lot of prep, and they knew precisely what her and Alexander Torshin were doing, which was to be one spoke going after the hub in a wheel of Russian intelligence operations to get Donald Trump.
In 2015, Torshin and Butina made the scene, wherever it was. Who was paying for all this travel would come out later. But for now, Butina was a consummate networker. At CPAC in February 2015, one attendee described meeting her in the book Russian Roulette. He was struck by how overly solicitous she was. Could they be friends on Facebook? How could they stay in touch? All I can think is, what the fuck is this about? Indeed, what was this about? Because now, Butina wasn't just showing up at the NRA convention in Nashville. It was any conservative event. CPAC, National Prayer Breakfast, Freedom Fest. It was like Butina was looking for something. And then this happened.
I'm visiting from Russia, so my question... Good friend of Obama, Putin.
In Las Vegas, in July 2015. At the Libertarian Conference Freedom Fest, candidate Donald Trump was speaking. Trump took questions from the audience, something he doesn't often do. The first questioner was Maria Butina. Her question had nothing to do with guns.
My question will be about foreign politics. If you would be elected as a president, what will be your foreign politics, especially in the relationships with my country? Do you want to continue the politics of sanctions that are damaging of both economy, or you have any other ideas?
Okay. Obama gets along with nobody. I believe I would get along very nicely with Putin. I don't think he'd need the sanctions. I think that we would get along very, very well.
When a president speaks, whatever they say becomes U.S. policy. So while Trump had not yet been elected, this was nonetheless quite a coup for Russia from the Obama administration's harsh sanctions on Russia for invading Crimea in 2014.
Group of individuals. This is all about the mind. It's not about how fancy you are.
At this same event in Las Vegas, Butina approached another speaker, the CEO of Overstock.com, Patrick Byrne. She told him he was famous in Russia and that she was sent to meet him. They soon began an affair. It would seem her dance card was filling up, as she was already in a relationship with Paul Erickson by 2015, a mid-level Republican strategist from South Dakota. Butina's lawyers would later argue that her relationship with Erickson was not one of convenience, but true love, showing this karaoke video they made in Moscow. Butina's electronic communications produced at trial suggest otherwise. Erickson's neighbor told the UK's 4 News about seeing Butina around the building.
I've never seen Paul with a woman before, so it was surprising. And he introduced me and said she was from Russia, and that was fine. And then we'd run into each other quite a bit in the hall. She was not smiling a lot. And
She didn't seem very happy here, is that what you're saying?
No, I didn't sense that she was delighted to be here with him. I have the feeling that he liked her more than she liked him. If you're a couple that are living together, you sometimes hold hands or something. I never saw them hug or hold hands or anything.
But the most consequential accomplishment of Butina's was yet to come. In December of 2015, Butina led a delegation of NRA bigwigs to Moscow to meet high-ranking Russian officials and tour a gun manufacturer. This trip would end up being a big problem for the NRA. Delegation participants included NRA board member David Keene, NRA Vice President Pete Brownell, NRA Gold Ring of Freedom Chairman Joe Gregory, Outdoor Channel CEO Jim Liberatore and his wife, NRA supporters Arnold and Hillary Goldschlager, and then Sheriff David Clark and his wife. After the NRA delegation visit, Butina would write Torshin, "We should let them express their gratitude now. We will put pressure on them quietly later." 2016, the world was about to change, and Butina would be in prison in less than 2 years. In March of 2016, according to an FBI agent's affidavit, Butina emailed an American that Putin's side had given them a yes. She wrote that a representative of the Russian presidential administration had given approval for building this communication channel. Why a back channel? Well, what's wrong with the front channel? Is there something you're trying to say in the back that you don't want the front to know about? What was going on? Removing any mystery as to their aim, Erickson wrote an email in May of 2016 to Trump campaign aide Rick Dearborn with the subject Kremlin Connection, offering to set up a back-channel meeting between Trump and Vladimir Putin. Erickson said that Torshin was Putin's emissary, looking to make first contact with Trump, and that Torshin would make contact with the campaign at a later date. The date of an NRA dinner. By August 2016, Butina was in the U.S. on a student visa, now a graduate student at American University in Washington, D.C., living in an apartment at 3617 38th Street, NW, and meeting more and more Republicans through dinner parties hosted by George D. O'Neill Jr., an heir to the Rockefeller fortune and known philanderer. In October 2016, Erickson emailed an acquaintance that he'd helped secure a very private line of communication between the Kremlin and key Republican leaders through, of all conduits, the NRA. Classmates of hers said that in class, Butina would announce that she was working on a diplomatic project between the US and Russia. She had an iPhone case with a shirtless Vladimir Putin. She would get into heated arguments in class defending Russia. At their social events, grad students would often see her with her much older boyfriend. Prosecutors would later share emails revealing that Erickson had helped Butina with her grad school assignments. As Monica Hess writes in the Styles section for the Washington Post, Butina may or may not have been a Russian spy, but she had accomplished becoming an American fantasy. She compares Butina to the Gillian Flynn novel Gone Girl, in a passage about the archetypal cool girl.
Cool girl. Men always use that, don't they, as their defining compliment. She's a cool girl. Cool girl is hot. Cool girl is gay. Cool girl is fun. Cool girl never gets angry at her man. She only smiles in a chagrin-loving manner. She likes what he likes.
Maria Butina is an NRA cool girl, a unicorn dream of what a man who loved guns might be seeking a woman to love him. If there were boyfriends in her life, or dates, or parties, or nightclubs, they weren't a part of her online personality. In her photos, she's almost always alone, like a realtor's open house left purposely devoid of furniture so buyers could imagine themselves living there. The men who championed her were so pleased to meet a woman who fit an ideal mold, they never stopped to think that maybe she was an ideal mold.
Torshin was literally receiving medals at this time from the FSB, Russia's intelligence agency previously known as the KGB. Torshin and Butina dined with Donald Trump Jr. at an NRA event in Louisville, taking this photo. Butina later asked if they had gotten approval from above to post the photo. Which is the thing in all this, as their communications were revealed in court documents. If they were not up to espionage, they sure seemed to talk to each other like they were. In October 2016, it did not look good for the Trump campaign. Butina and Torshin exchanged DMs on October 6th. Butina, time will tell. We made our bet. I am following our game. Torshin, this is hard to teach. Patience and cold blood and faith in yourself, and everything will definitely turn out. Butina, yesterday's dinner showed that American society is broken in relation to Russia. This is now the dividing line of opinions, the crucial one in the election race. Republicans are for us, Democrats against. 50-50. Our move here is very important. On election night 2016, after Trump's surprise victory, Butina texted Torshin, saying she was back in her hotel room, ready for further orders. Butina sent Torshin a message predicting John Bolton would be named Secretary of State. She asked Torshin to find out how our people felt, adding, "Our opinion will be taken into account." They also shared a report on hosting a conference to talk to U.S. politicians. The proposal said the conference must be presented as a private initiative, not a government undertaking. During the inauguration, Butina texted a photo of herself in front of the U.S. Capitol, a very public landmark open to tourists. "Daredevil girl," Torshin texted back. "Really? Why would being near a U.S. monument be considered daredevil?
Documents show Torshin allegedly praised her, writing, "You have upstaged Anna Chapman," referring to another Russian sleeper agent.
Days after the election, Butina hosted a costume party for her birthday, where she told guests she had worked as a conduit between the Trump campaign and Russia. She dressed as Anastasia, Erickson as Rasputin. Both of them would claim to be working on the Trump transition team. On December 1st, 2016, Erickson emailed Butina about arrangements for a delegation of Russians to attend the National Prayer Breakfast. He wrote, "To be safe, I had asked Torshin to place $3,500 on one of your Russian charge cards in order to pay these deposits." Torshin even had an appointment to meet Trump in February 2017 at the National Prayer Breakfast, where Butina and Erickson had arranged for a Russian delegation to attend. It was canceled at the last minute when a White House aide noticed Torshin's name and raised concerns about the new U.S. president meeting a noted Russian mobster. It was at this point in 2017 that bank officials began to track the accounts of Butina and Erickson because the financial activity and amounts had signs of money laundering.
In one instance, and I wrote a very lengthy story about this, there were documents that showed that Wells Fargo's anti-money laundering team, they had began checking into Butina's and Erickson's bank activity in early 2017. So, right around the time that Trump is inaugurated, they start looking at this. What we found was a $45,000 payment to a law firm, large cash withdrawals, nearly $100,000 sent to a Russian bank. In all, there was about $300,000 that banks had flagged as very suspicious. There was also about $89,000 that passed between his account and one held by Maria Butina at Russia's Alfa Bank, about $93,000 that was sent or received during a single 4-month period right after Maria Butina had arrived in the U.S. So all of these suspicious activity, it appears that they used a company that they set up called Bridges LLC to essentially conduct that. Butina was listed as the sole signer on the checking account. Erickson ended up signing checks from it, but the banks could not figure out what the purpose of this company was. And then suddenly in the summer of 2017, there's nearly $100,000 in wires, checks, transfers, cash transactions, everything that were deemed suspicious. In the case of Paul Erickson, what we found was he had been paying a number of bills for her without explanation. He was paying her rent, he was paying her tuition at American University, he paid her monthly furniture bill. He ended up being hit with like 77 overdraft fees. Again, these are in documents that we had obtained. He took out payday loans. In one account, he had a balance of just like $9, but he really did appear to be just sending all of this money to Butina.
By 2018, Butina was finishing up her degree at American University in Washington, D.C., and would be graduating. She had also graduated to meeting with some high-level Russian intelligence officers, as this photo taken by the FBI revealed. American intelligence had been monitoring Butina since she had first visited the United States, it turned out, and her sitting down with a mysterious official known to be Russian intelligence seemed unlikely to be a social affair. On July 15, 2018, Erickson was packing up Butina's apartment to drive back to South Dakota when a team of FBI agents raided her apartment. Butina was charged with being an unregistered foreign agent, as in trying to exert foreign influence without being noticed. Back channels. In Erickson's South Dakota apartment, agents found a note Butina had written to herself, how to respond to FSB offer for employment. When Butina was arrested, Torshin abruptly resigned from his top position at the Bank of Russia
Russian central bank, where he had been a deputy governor and a very high-profile official, announced unexpectedly that he had suddenly retired. Alexander Torshin more or less evaporated in Moscow.
Erickson was back in South Dakota, facing charges of his own for money laundering and running fraudulent investment schemes.
15 лет лишения свободы. За что? Я, когда услышал, что вокруг нее что-то происходит, у нас публичное мероприятие, но мне здесь скрывать нечего. Для начала я просто опросил всех руководителей наших спецслужб. Кто такая? Никто о ней вообще ничего не знает.
Russia insisted there was nothing nefarious going on with Butna and that nobody knew who she was, while at the same time demanding her release and celebrating her as a political prisoner.
To me, it sounds very much like McCarthyism. Where is American democracy?
Soon, Butna and Erickson both made deals to cooperate with investigators. Erickson admitted to scamming investors for years over bogus real estate schemes and fake companies. Butna admitted to a scheme to influence Republicans for Russia, which is what it appeared to be all along.
We obtained thousands of private Twitter messages they sent each other over 2.5 years.
Was he close to Putin?
I don't think so.
So you wrote him a message and you said you are an influential member of Putin's team. Your words.
It doesn't suggest he's close to Putin in any way. In Russia,
Was he an influential member of Putin's team?
I don't know.
Well, you wrote that. You know, in reading through your messages, it reads as if he's your intelligence case officer.
Look, this is I think it's an American, very old saying that suggests that wolves have teeth, but not all animals with teeth are wolves. You cannot judge a person based on appearance.
In a document sent to Torshin, she wrote that these dinners will make it possible to exert the speediest and most effective influence on the process of making decisions in the American establishment. That's pretty explicit that you're seeking to influence U.S. policy.
It's pretty explicit that I'm seeking that our two countries establish friendship between each other. And I don't mean governments, I mean people.
Do you want to continue the politics of sanctions that are damaging of both economy, or you have any other ideas?
I don't think you'd need the sanctions. I think that we would get along very, very well.
One of the goals of the Russian government at this point in time was to get rid of those sanctions. It was a major goal.
It was also a major goal for every Russian citizen that suffers today from these sanctions. I believe that our countries shall not fight.
So you asked about sanctions and not gun rights because you want us to be friends.
Absolutely.
John Bolton will be Secretary of State 90%, she writes, and continues, ask our people if they're happy with that. Our opinion will be taken into account. What does that mean?
Well, Leslie, Paul told me to write that.
Paul Erickson, her former boyfriend and a Republican operative.
Butna ended up serving 18 months in federal prison. She spent her 30th birthday in solitary confinement.
Ms. Butina was traveling across South Dakota and, to my understanding, other states within the Midwest, talking to student groups. I think this is another piece of evidence about how far the Russian government is willing to go to undermine our democratic principles and undermine our country. And frankly, I'm angry. I mean, this woman held herself out as a freedom fighter, and instead it's pretty clear that she's a scam artist and a liar.
Some denied that Butna was part of the larger Russian effort to subvert elections, which was documented in the Mueller report. Was she a spy or not? Seducing men and brandishing guns aside, there was not much actual espionage being performed by Butna as far as gathering of intelligence. This TV report about Soviet active measures covers forgery, disinformation, and other means the KGB used to undermine their rivals.
Forgery is only one type of active measure. Another is the Soviet front.
Soviets also have more than 60 years of experience of running so-called Soviet fronts, organizations which claim to be public, independent organizations, but actually they are being run primarily by International Department of the Central Committee of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union.
Another type of active measure is the agent of influence. Mr. Levchenko has first-hand knowledge of this activity.
Without agents of influence, Soviets will never be able to implement any active measures at all. In many cases, agent of influence is not used for collection of intelligence. He is supposed to influence public opinion, business circles, or government circles, or public organization.
An agent of influence does not collect or deliver intelligence. They seek to promote ideas and alliances under a false pretense. You know, back channels. While Budna was in prison, Eriksson would visit her regularly. After pleading guilty to his own previous money laundering schemes and helping investigators, Eriksson was sentenced to 7 years in federal prison. Budna returned to Russia after 18 months in federal prison to a hero's welcome. Alexander Torshin was sanctioned by the U.S. Treasury Department in April of 2018, along with a list of Russian oligarchs for interfering in the 2016 U.S. election, meaning any assets of his were seized and he's no longer allowed to enter the U.S. The NRA? Well, their problems were just beginning.
The FBI has been investigating, among other things, the possibility that the NRA was used as a large-scale conduit for Russian money into the effort to elect Trump president.
Never mind that the NRA had made a Russian gangster a lifetime member. It's not just about how humiliating it is for a staunchly American group to have become used by Moscow to further its own aims. Somewhere along all the conferences, dinners, and selfies, Torshin quite possibly gave the NRA $20 million or more.
And importantly, they made sure that most of that money came out of an arm of the NRA that doesn't disclose anything about its donors.
Even if it is legal to keep undisclosed donors, it is not legal for the NRA to take money from a foreign agent.
Now, that is a crime, and the reason that it's a crime is there is a long-standing law in the United States that says, it's from 1966, that foreigners cannot spend in U.S. elections.
The NRA has been perfectly free to disprove that they took millions of dollars from Russia, but they have avoided the subject entirely. In fact, the NRA has struggled to maintain its funding, which wouldn't be the case if their membership had exploded to the point of suddenly having $20 million more to spend in 2016. Why did they have so much more money than usual? That's not all the NRA has to answer for. The NRA's dalliances with Budna and Torshin has brought its very non-profit status into question. In 2019, the Senate Finance Committee issued an in-depth report, The NRA in Russia, How a Tax-Exempt Organization Became a Foreign Asset. The Senate report details the NRA's official trip to Moscow, how the NRA delegation met with high-level Russian officials and sanctioned individuals, and how all of this was done for private allurement, personal profit, in direct violation of the NRA's tax-exempt status. Tax exemption is a huge deal. This allows nonprofit organizations to encourage donations because donors can write off the money they donated to pay less taxes. Moreover, tax-exempt organizations like the NRA pay no taxes on the money they bring in. So if your business made $300 million and you paid a 21% corporate tax rate, you'd fork over $63 million. When the NRA makes $300 million a year, which is what they average, they keep it all. That's our tax dollars carrying the weight for the NRA. The purpose of tax exemption is for civic service, organizations that help their community or provide a public service. The application process is stringent, and tax-exempt status is not easy to attain. Churches, child care organizations, homeless shelters, these are competing for nonprofit donations. And they're all subject to the same requirements of nonprofit law. Other entities that the Senate Finance Committee has investigated hospitals, museums, credit unions, veterans groups, Acorn, Ellis Island, the Nature Conservancy, and Jack Abramoff. The same rules apply to everyone. Just like one person with a gun can think that they are above the law, perhaps a whole organization centered on guns thought they were above the law. When the Senate Finance Committee started asking questions about the NRA trip to meet with the leaders of a hostile nation, the NRA denied that the trip was even an official NRA trip. Dana Loesch, who was an official NRA spokesperson, repeatedly tweeted that the trip was not an official NRA trip. The NRA sent a letter to Ranking Member Senator Ron Wyden insisting the NRA members that traveled to Moscow did so on their own accord. Senator Ron Wyden had the receipts. Emails within the NRA showed the exact opposite. Trip participants had relied on NRA employees and funds to secure visas, plan their itinerary, and arrange their travel. The NRA president at the time, Alan Kors, sent a letter directly to Torshin that he was disappointed he couldn't make the trip due to health reasons. In the letter, the NRA president literally wrote, "Dave Keene and Joe Gregory will represent the NRA and our 5 million members better than anyone else." Gregory's lawyer told the Senate that the NRA paid for his trip. Boutna's group had fronted a lot of the expenses for the trip as well, probably tens of thousands. She spent $6,000 just for Sheriff David Clark, another $6,000 for Jim Liberatore, CEO of Outdoor Channel. After the trip, Boutna mentioned that she had fronted $6,000 of personal money and would like payment in return to avoid an international issue. On February 12, 2016, Boutna emailed an invoice to NRA staff for $6,000 from Bridges LLC, which had been founded 2 days prior. Internal emails revealed that NRA executives spent years making a series of transactions aimed at, quote, getting the trip off the NRA's books. Obviously, if the trips were on the NRA's books in the first place, it was an NRA trip. So if the NRA was sending a delegation to Moscow, it must be in furtherance of its charitable mission, as defined by public policy doctrine, right? Again, not so much. Trip participants were told that first and foremost, this trip was intended to demonstrate Torshin's pull, that he would have one of the most influential political organizations in America showing up in Moscow at his behest. After the NRA president withdrew from the trip over health concerns, Boutna dangled the possibility of meeting Putin to make sure the trip still happened. Boutna was already claiming to be an intermediary for Putin to the Outdoor Channel CEO Jim Liberatore, who wanted to do a TV program with Putin. Liberatore's lawyers told the Senate, Mr. Liberatore's purpose was purely commercial and not related in any way to U.S. politics or gun rights. He even paid Boutna $20,000 as a development fee for the Putin TV show. He wasn't the only delegation member in it for business instead of charitable endeavors. David Keene wanted to get an interview with Putin for the Washington Times, and Torshin said it could happen. The Keenes were also looking to make a deal on buying jet fuel from a Russian company and were in talks with a Kremlin official. NRA Vice President and incoming President Pete Brownell is also President and CEO of Brownells Inc., a firearm accessories and parts supplier. Brownell was specifically told he was at risk of meeting individuals on this trip that were sanctioned by the U.S. government, but insisted on doing so anyway, apparently to discuss future business deals. He had been talking to Boutna all year about business deals in Russia and specifically told her, I am not interested in attending if it is just an NRA trip. Brownell later claimed that when he spoke with the deputy prime minister in charge of Russia's defense industry, it was because they happened to run into each other at the same shooting range in Moscow. Documents later proved otherwise. Even more far afield from charitable gun rights issues was that the NRA delegation was being introduced to high-level Russian government officials and oligarchs close to Putin. The delegation met with the following individuals while in Russia, at least 2 of whom were on the U.S. Treasury's blocked persons list. One name of note? Konstantin Nikolaev, the Russian energy and transportation oligarch, who was later revealed to be Butina's financial backer. But it's not just using a nonprofit as a pretense for a trip abroad for personal enrichment. It's not just meeting with individuals sanctioned by the U.S. Treasury Department. It's not just showing more deference and respect to a Russian president than an American one. The NRA itself has had more internal drama than Desperate Housewives. The Moscow trip was just a taste of the profiteering of greedy NRA executives hiding behind a nonprofit status to make themselves and their friends even richer. There was the $240,000 in questionable expenses from NRA chief Wayne LaPierre for trips to Italy, the Bahamas, and Reno. The $200,000 in wardrobe purchases charged to the NRA by Wayne LaPierre, or the $6.5 million mansion in a gated golf community that the NRA promised to buy for Wayne LaPierre. There was the discovery of reimbursement expenses going to apartments or houses on a permanent basis. NRA senior official Josh Powell dealt with allegations of sexual harassment by paying a settlement out of tax-exempt funds. Then he was accused of more sexual harassment. This was with the NRA's longtime ad agency, Ackerman McQueen. This escalated to a falling out between the two giants after 4 decades of working together into acrimonious lawsuits of overcharging, non-payment, and wild expenditures. There was an IRS complaint about some of the brazen self-dealing that NRA executives were doing to funnel millions to their side businesses. And through all this, Oliver North was trying to warn board members that all this self-enrichment in violation of nonprofit law could cost the NRA its tax-exempt status. And this was a guy who didn't think twice to sell arms illegally to Iran to fund a war in Nicaragua, destroy evidence, and ended up indicted on 16 charges. Oliver North ended up driven out of his position as NRA president by Wayne LaPierre for being a snitch.
Clashed with NRA Executive Vice President Wayne LaPierre over spending priorities and budget shortfalls.
And somewhere along the line, the NRA admitted it was hemorrhaging cash. NRA TV and Dana Loesch, bye-bye.
We're also out of coffee.
The NRA couldn't even afford perks for their employees, like coffee. They were taking out loans for millions. Then they laid off 200 of their employees and asked the remaining staff to take a 20% pay cut. Meanwhile, Wayne LaPierre's salary? Over $2 million a year. After seeing the lavish dinners and expensive wine that the NRA executives were accustomed to, former NRA fundraiser Aaron Davis told The New Yorker, "I just thought if the typical NRA member knew that this is how the organization really works, then there's just no way they would give money." And now, the NRA was in legal fights with the attorney generals of New York and DC over their nonprofit status.
No matter what the heck the cost was on friendships, no matter what the heck the cost was on people that lost their way along the way, the cost that we bore was probably about $100 million hit in lost revenue and real cost to this association in 2018 and 2019. I mean, that's huge. Think of the power of government, the power of weaponized government, and all the resources they have. When they're, I mean, I've never seen anything like that in the United States of America, to tell you the truth. I mean, that is Cuba. That is communist China. That is Venezuela. It's Russia.
Of course, when the NRA was founded in 1871, it was not a lobbying arm for gun manufacturers that laundered foreign money into our elections. It was founded by two Union officers who were disappointed that their troops hadn't been able to shoot better during the Civil War and wanted to improve marksmanship. The NRA had never even endorsed a presidential candidate until Ronald Reagan in 1980, who got shot the next year, along with his press secretary, Jim Brady. So, to review. America faces an epidemic of gun violence where thousands of children die from gunfire every year. After a national outcry for over 2 decades, U.S. senators still obstruct even modest gun safety legislation under false pretenses, while the NRA assists in their elections through heavy donations and consistent illegal coordination. NRA members, less than 0.01% of the population, are fed misinformation to think they're trying to protect the Constitution in order to keep donations pouring in to support NRA executives' lavish lifestyles and sexual harassment settlements. NRA leadership became so accustomed to self-enrichment schemes and political influence, they proved easy marks for Russian agents of influence who used the NRA's nonprofit status to launder tens of millions of dollars into electing Trump. The NRA tried to cover up its involvement in an official visit with Russian leaders, which had nothing to do with its charitable purpose, because it was just another cash grab by its leaders looking to line their own pockets by breaking even more U.S. laws. And this group expects to keep not paying taxes because they provide a valuable, charitable public service.
Just a few minutes ago, my office filed a lawsuit against the National Rifle Association to dissolve the organization in its entirety for years of self-dealing and illegal conduct that violate New York's charities law and undermine its own mission. The organization went unchecked for decades, while top executives funneled millions into their own pockets. These individuals in the NRA are charged with failing to manage the NRA's funds and failing to follow numerous state and federal laws, which contributed to the loss of more than $64 million in just 3 years.
Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above, from the mountains to the prairies.
We never had a collective moment like the way we came together on September 11, 2001, to absorb the shock that in 2016, our democracy was attacked in sweeping fashion. Reports seemed to trickle out, and eventually, everyone just seemed to acknowledge that Russia helped decide our election. But whenever it was that reality finally stared you in the face, you had to face it alone. It makes you feel lonely, powerless. In the wake of 9/11, Congress worked across party lines to protect our country from future attacks. One significant action? They updated the tax code, which provides for the suspension of the tax-exempt status of any organization that supports terrorism.
What people might not remember about Watergate was that it was a campaign finance violation. And it was a situation where bags of money, many of them from foreign sources, were brought to the White House for the purpose of paying for the burglars. And people were so outraged by it that they enacted the law, and they also enacted the Federal Election Commission to enforce the law. And look where we are now. We're right there at that same era.
In the end, we're asking the IRS to simply enforce its own laws. This should be something Law and Order fans can get behind, because what's at stake is the kind of country we raise our families in, one where we value democracy, the rule of law, and the lives of children, because they're the next generation.
I don't know, I've gotten kind of cynical in my old age, but you see I'm still here, so I'm hopeful. And I have to say that these kids at Parkland High have really been inspiring. You know, I remember being in high school, and I couldn't have imagined being that articulate and that, you know, forceful and passionate. And it gives me hope. The young generation gives me hope.